Lieutenant Commander Victoria Ghost Williams stood at attention in the sterile conference room at Naval Base Norfolk, her dress blue uniform immaculate despite the career-ending charges being read against her. What the five-man tribunal didn't know was that in exactly 72 hours, the USS Ronald Reagan would break its scheduled deployment route and change course by 400 nautical miles, all to find a woman they were about to discharge in disgrace. Welcome to Those Who Left a Trace, where we uncover the extraordinary stories of ordinary people who changed the world without anyone knowing. Before we dive into this incredible story of institutional betrayal, classified secrets, and the moment when an entire aircraft carrier battle group realized they had made the biggest mistake in naval history, tell me in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that sometimes the truth takes time to surface, hit that subscribe button and join our community of over 3.8 million subscribers who never miss these powerful stories that matter. April 23rd, 2024, 0800 hours, Naval Base Norfolk, Virginia. The administrative building buzzed with the routine efficiency of military bureaucracy, but Conference Room 217 carried an atmosphere of finality that seemed to weigh on everyone present. Lieutenant Commander Victoria Williams, 34 years old and an 11-year veteran of naval intelligence, sat ramrod straight in her chair as Captain Harrison Reynolds, the tribunal president, shuffled through documents that would end her military career. Victoria had always been different from other naval officers. Standing 5 feet 6 inches with sharp green eyes and prematurely gray hair that she kept in regulation style, she possessed an analytical mind that could process vast amounts of intelligence data and identify patterns that others missed. Her colleagues called her Ghost, not because she was elusive, but because she could find connections in intelligence reports that seemed to materialize from nowhere, like spirits revealing hidden truths. For 11 years, Victoria had served with distinction in naval intelligence, specializing in analyzing foreign naval capabilities and threat assessments for carrier battle groups operating in contested waters. Her reports had been instrumental in preventing 3 separate international incidents, and her analysis had saved American lives by identifying hostile naval movements before they could threaten U.S. forces. But Victoria's greatest asset, her ability to see patterns where others saw only noise, had also become her greatest liability. 6 months ago, while analyzing intelligence reports from the South China Sea, Victoria had discovered something that the Navy desperately wanted to ignore. Evidence that a foreign power had developed submarine technology that could neutralize America's aircraft carrier advantage. The intelligence was fragmentary, scattered across dozens of seemingly unrelated reports about sonar contacts, underwater acoustic signatures, and unusual naval exercises. But Victoria's pattern recognition abilities allowed her to piece together a picture that was both clear and terrifying. An advanced submarine force that could track and target American carriers with unprecedented precision. Victoria had done exactly what her training and oath required. She had documented her findings in a classified intelligence report and submitted it through proper channels to the Office of Naval Intelligence. The report should have triggered immediate defensive measures, operational changes, and strategic reassessments of American naval deployments in contested waters. Instead, it had triggered a campaign to destroy her career. Lieutenant Commander Williams, Captain Reynolds said, his voice carrying the formal authority of someone conducting official proceedings, you stand accused of violating security protocols, disseminating classified information without authorization, and conducting unauthorized intelligent analysis outside your assigned scope of responsibilities. The charges were carefully crafted to sound serious, while avoiding any mention of the actual content of Victoria's intelligence report. The Navy couldn't acknowledge that she had discovered genuine threats to carrier operations without also acknowledging that they had chosen to ignore those threats for political and operational reasons. The evidence against you, Reynolds continued, includes unauthorized access to classified databases, preparation of intelligence assessments without proper oversight, and distribution of those assessments to personnel without appropriate security clearances. Sarah listened to the charges with the same analytical detachment she applied to intelligence reports. Every accusation was technically accurate, but deliberately misleading. She had accessed classified databases because her security clearance and job responsibilities required her to do so. She had prepared intelligence assessments, because that was literally her assigned function as a naval intelligence officer. She had distributed those assessments because Navy regulations required intelligence personnel to share threat information with operational commanders. The tribunal's real message was clear. Sarah had identified threats that the Navy preferred not to acknowledge, and she was being punished for doing her job too effectively. "How do you plead to these charges?" Reynolds asked. Sarah looked directly at each member of the tribunal, recognizing the uncomfortable expressions of officers who knew they were participating in a betrayal of everything the Navy claimed to represent. "Not guilty on all charges, sir. I fulfill my sworn obligation to identify and report threats to U.S. naval forces." "Lieutenant Commander Williams," said Commander Janet Pierce, the tribunal's legal officer, "your unauthorized analysis created alarm and confusion among operational commanders. Your conclusions were not supported by official intelligence assessments." "Ma'am," Sarah replied, "my conclusions were based on the same intelligence data available to official assessment teams. The difference was that I analyzed the data objectively rather than filtering it through political considerations." The statement hung in the air like an accusation, forcing the tribunal to confront the reality that Sarah's crime was producing intelligent analysis that contradicted preferred narratives about American naval superiority. The tribunal proceedings continued for 3 hours, with witnesses testify about Sarah's pattern of insubordination and failure to respect operational security requirements. The witnesses were carefully selected naval personnel who repeated talking points that painted Sarah as a rogue analyst whose unauthorized activities had created security risks and operational complications. But what none of the witnesses mentioned, what the tribunal couldn't allow them to mention, was that Sarah's intelligence analysis had been accurate. Her predictions about hostile submarine capabilities had been proven correct by events that occurred after her report was suppressed, and her warnings about carrier vulnerability had been validated by classified exercises that demonstrated exactly the threats she had identified. The tribunal finds Lieutenant Commander Williams guilty on all charges. Reynolds announced after a brief deliberation, "You are hereby discharged from the United States Navy under other than honorable conditions, effective immediately. Your security clearance is revoked, and you are prohibited from discussing any classified information obtained during your service." Sarah stood and saluted, maintaining military bearing even as her career was being destroyed. "I understand the tribunal's decision, sir. I respectfully maintain that I acted in accordance with my oath and my duty to protect American naval forces. Your personal effects will be returned to you, and you have 48 hours to vacate base housing," Reynolds said. This tribunal is adjourned. As Sarah left the conference room, she passed Captain Michael Hawk Stevens, her former commanding officer in the Office of Naval Intelligence. Stevens had been her mentor for 3 years, teaching her the analytical techniques that made her so effective at identifying patterns in complex intelligence data. His expression carried the pain of someone watching a promising career being destroyed for political reasons. "Sarah," Stevens said quietly, "I'm sorry. You deserve better than this." "Captain," Sarah replied, "I did my job. That's all any of us can do." Stevens watched as Sarah walked down the corridor, her bearing still military despite the civilian clothes she would soon be required to wear. He knew that the Navy was losing one of its most gifted intelligence analysts because she had been too good at her job, too willing to report uncomfortable truths about threats that the service preferred to ignore. What Stevens didn't know, what nobody at Norfolk knew, was that Sarah's suppressed intelligence report was about to be proven catastrophically accurate in ways that would force the Navy to confront the consequences of their decision to prioritize politics over security. 48 hours later, Sarah Williams sat in a rented apartment in Virginia Beach, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing 11 years of military service reduced to personal possessions and meaningless commendations. Her Navy career was over. Her security clearance was gone, and her professional reputation had been systematically destroyed by an institution she had served with dedication and honor. The apartment was a stark contrast of base housing she had occupied for years. Smaller, cheaper, and lacking the sense of community that came with military life. Sarah had chosen it because it was close enough to Norfolk to maintain contact with a few friends who were willing to associate with disgraced ex-naval officer, but far enough away to avoid constant reminders of the career she had lost. Sarah's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, recognizing that former intelligence officers with revoked security clearances often receive calls from foreign intelligence services interested in recruiting disgruntled ex-personnel. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Sarah, this is Captain Stevens. I need to see you immediately. Can you meet me at the Oceanfront Diner in 20 minutes? Sarah recognized the stress in Stevens' voice, the tone of someone dealing with a crisis situation. "Captain, you shouldn't be contacting me. My discharge conditions." "Sarah, forget the discharge conditions. We have a situation that requires your expertise, and you're the only person who can help us." Stevens' urgency convinced Sarah to agree to the meeting, despite the potential consequences of associating with active military personnel. While under investigation, she arrived at the diner to find Stevens already seated in a corner booth, wearing civilian clothes and carrying an expression of barely controlled panic. "Captain, what's happening?" Sarah asked as she sat down. "Sarah, everything in your intelligence report is happening. Right now, the carrier group you warned about, they're being tracked by submarines using exactly the technology you identified." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Which carrier group?" "The Ronald Reagan battle group. They're conducting operations in the South China Sea, and they're being shadowed by submarines that our sonar systems can barely detect. The technology is so advanced that our standard detection methods are useless." "Captain, I warned about this 6 months ago. The intelligence was all there, but nobody wanted to acknowledge it." Stevens leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Sarah, it gets worse. The Reagan's intelligence team has no idea how to analyze the threat they're facing. They're using standard threat assessment protocols that don't account for the advanced capabilities you identified in your report." "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The Reagan needs someone who understands the intelligence patterns that indicate advanced submarine threats. They need someone who can analyze sonar data and acoustic signatures to determine hostile intentions and capabilities." "Captain, I've been discharged. I have no security clearance, no official authority, and no legal standing to provide intelligence support to naval operations." Stevens was quiet for a moment, processing the impossible situation he was describing. "Sarah, the Reagan's battle group includes 6,000 personnel aboard 5 ships. If they're ambushed by submarines using the technology you identified, we could lose an entire carrier group." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. An aircraft carrier battle group represented America's primary tool for power projection, capable of launching airstrikes, providing humanitarian assistance, and maintaining stability in contested regions. The loss of a carrier group would not only cost thousands of American lives, but would fundamentally alter the strategic balance of power in the Pacific. "Captain, even if I wanted to help, how could I provide intelligence support without official authorization?" Stevens pulled out a secure phone and showed Sarah a message that had been sent from the Pentagon less than an hour earlier. "Immediate assistance required from all available intelligence personnel with expertise in advanced submarine threat analysis. Authorization granted for emergency consultation, regardless of current clearance status." Sarah stared at the message, recognizing that someone at the highest levels of the Navy had finally acknowledged the validity of her intelligence analysis. The same institution that had destroyed her career was now asking for her help to prevent the catastrophic consequences of ignoring her warnings. "Sarah," Stevens said, "the Reagan is 400 nautical miles off course from their scheduled deployment route. They're heading toward your last known position because Admiral Martinez believes you're the only person who can help them understand what they're facing." Sarah looked out the diner window toward the horizon where the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly toward contested waters where American sailors were confronting threats that their leaders had refused to acknowledge. The Navy that had betrayed her was now asking her to save the lives of people who had never heard her name, but whose safety depended on knowledge that only she possessed. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked. 6 hours later, Sarah found herself aboard a Navy helicopter flying toward a rendezvous point where the USS Ronald Reagan would surface from radio silence to retrieve the intelligence analyst they had discharged 3 days earlier. The irony was almost overwhelming. She was returned to active duty aboard the same type of vessel whose vulnerabilities she had identified and whose crew she had tried to protect. The helicopter pilot, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Martinez, had been briefed only that they were retrieving a critical intelligence asset for emergency consultation with the carrier battle group. Martinez didn't know that her passenger was a disgraced ex-naval officer whose career had been destroyed for telling uncomfortable truths about American naval vulnerabilities. "Ma'am," Martinez said over the intercom, "we're approaching the Reagan's position. I've never seen a carrier break deployment orders to retrieve a civilian consultant." "Lieutenant Commander," Sarah replied, "I hope your ship's intelligence team is better prepared to listen to analysis than the tribunal that discharged me 3 days ago." Martinez's expression shifted from professional courtesy to curiosity as she realized that her passenger wasn't a typical intelligence contractor. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of analysis are you providing?" "The kind that people get discharged for conducting," Sarah said. "The kind that saves lives when institutions finally decide to acknowledge reality." As the helicopter approached the Reagan, Sarah could see the massive carrier changing course in real time, its escort ships adjusting their positions to maintain defensive formations around the 100,000-ton nuclear-powered centerpiece of American naval power. The sight was both inspiring and sobering, a floating city capable of projecting American military power anywhere in the world, but also vulnerable to threats that the Navy had refused to acknowledge until those threats became immediate and undeniable. The helicopter touched down on the Reagan's flight deck with a precision that marked all naval aviation operations. As Sarah disembarked, she was met by Admiral Carlos Martinez, the battle group commander, and Captain Sarah Chun, the Reagan's commanding officer. Both officers carried expressions of professional urgency mixed with personal embarrassment at having to request assistance from someone their service had just discharged. "Dr. Williams," Admiral Martinez said, using a civilian title that reflected Sarah's loss of military rank, "thank you for agreeing to assist us despite the circumstances of your recent separation from the service." "Admiral," Sarah replied, "I took an oath to protect American naval forces. That oath doesn't expire when politicians decide that uncomfortable intelligence analysis threatens their preferred narratives." Martinez nodded grimly. "Dr. Williams, we need your expertise to analyze acoustic signatures and sonar contacts that our intelligence team can't identify. We're being tracked by submarines using technology that doesn't match any known threat assessment. Admiral, I documented this exact threat in my intelligence report 6 months ago. The technology exists, the capabilities are real, and the threat to carrier operations is immediate and serious." "Dr. Williams," Captain Chin interjected, "our standard anti-submarine warfare protocols aren't designed to counter the threats you're describing. We need new analytical approaches and detection methods." Sarah looked around the Reagan's command spaces, noting the sophisticated technology and professional competence that made American carriers the most powerful warships in the world. But she also recognized the institutional limitations that had led to her discharge. The preference for comfortable assumptions over uncomfortable realities, the tendency to dismiss intelligence that challenged existing operational doctrines. "Captain," Sarah said, "I can provide the analysis you need, but only if you're prepared to act on intelligence that contradicts everything the Navy has told you about carrier invulnerability." "Dr. Williams," Admiral Martinez replied, "3 days ago, we thought you were a rogue analyst whose unauthorized activities created security risks. Today we realize you may be the only person who can prevent this battle group from being destroyed by threats we didn't want to acknowledge." Sarah nodded, recognizing that the Reagan senior officers had undergone the same painful realization that had led to her discharge, that institutional preferences sometimes conflict with operational realities, and that the consequences of ignoring uncomfortable intelligence can be catastrophic. "Admiral," Sarah said, "let's go save your battle group." The Reagan's Combat Information Center was a marvel of modern military technology, filled with radar displays, communication systems, and computer terminals that could process vast amounts of data and coordinate complex military operations across thousands of square miles of ocean. But as Sarah reviewed the intelligence data that the ship's analysts have been struggling with for the past 48 hours, she immediately recognized patterns that confirmed her worst fears about advanced submarine threats. "Commander Jackson," Sarah said to the Reagan's intelligence officer, "show me the acoustic contact reports from the past 72 hours. Commander Patricia Jackson, a 15-year intelligence veteran who had initially resented having to work with a disgraced ex-officer, pulled up sonar data that showed dozens of contacts that didn't match known submarine signatures. Dr. Williams, our sonar operators are detecting something, but the signatures don't correspond to any submarines in our threat databases." Sarah studied the acoustic patterns, recognizing immediately what the Reagan's intelligence team had missed. "Commander, you're not looking for traditional submarine signatures. These contacts are using acoustic masking technology that makes them appear to be marine life, commercial shipping, or natural ocean phenomena." "Ma'am, that's impossible," Jackson replied. "Our sonar systems are designed to distinguish between biological contacts and mechanical signatures." "Commander, the technology one identified in my suppressed intelligence report includes acoustic camouflage systems that can mimic the sound signatures of whales, dolphins, and commercial vessels. Your sonar operators are hearing exactly what they're supposed to hear until the submarines decide to reveal themselves." Sarah began analyzing the data with techniques she had developed during her years in naval intelligence, identifying subtle patterns in the acoustic signatures that revealed the presence of advanced submarines operating around the Reagan battle group. What emerged was a picture of coordinated surveillance that had been ongoing for days without the carrier group's knowledge. "Commander," Sarah said, "you're being tracked by at least 6 submarines using technology that allows them to operate undetected by conventional sonar systems. They're maintaining position that would allow them to launch coordinated attacks against your entire battle group." Jackson stared at the analysis, recognizing that Sarah had identified threats that the Reagan's intelligence team had completely missed. "Dr. Williams, if this analysis is correct, we're essentially defenseless against attack." "Commander, this analysis is correct because it's based on intelligence that the Navy chose to suppress rather than acknowledge. The threats are real. The technology exists, and your battle group is currently surrounded by submarines that could destroy every ship in your formation." Admiral Martinez, who had been monitoring the intelligence analysis from the CIC's command station, approached Sarah with an expression of grim realization. "Dr. Williams, what do you recommend?" "Admiral, you need to implement immediate evasive maneuvers and activate every available countermeasure system. More importantly, you need to acknowledge that American carrier operations can no longer assume invulnerability to submarine threats." "Dr. Williams," Martinez said, "implementing the measures you're recommending will require us to acknowledge that our standard operating procedures are inadequate against advanced submarine threats." "Admiral," Sarah replied, "the alternative is losing a carrier battle group because institutional pride prevented you from acknowledging uncomfortable intelligence." Martinez activated the battle group's secure communication system and began issuing orders that would fundamentally change how the Reagan operated in contested waters. Anti-submarine warfare protocols were upgraded, evasive maneuvers were implemented, and intelligence analysis procedures were modified to account for advanced threats that had previously been dismissed as theoretical possibilities. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah worked with the Reagan's intelligence team to develop new analytical techniques for detecting and countering advanced submarine threats. Her methods, based on pattern recognition and multi-source intelligence fusion, allowed the carrier's sonar operators to identify hostile submarines that had been operating undetected for days. "Contact bearing 270, range for 1,000 yards, reported sonar technician first class Rodriguez. Signature matches the advanced submarine profile Dr. Williams identified." "All stop," Admiral Martinez ordered. "Launch ASW helicopters and activate torpedo countermeasures." As the Reagan's anti-submarine warfare systems engaged a hostile contact that Sarah had identified, the true scope of the threat became apparent. The carrier battle group had been surrounded by 6 advanced submarines whose presence had been completely undetected by conventional intelligence analysis. "Admiral," Sarah reported from the intelligence station, "hostile submarines are breaking contact and withdrawing to safe distances. They're using acoustic camouflage to mask their retreat, but our new detection methods are tracking their movements." Dr. Williams, Martinez said, "Your analysis just prevented the potential destruction of this battle group. The Navy owes you an apology that goes far beyond my authority to provide." Sarah looked around the Combat Information Center, noting the expressions of professional respect and personal gratitude from officers who had initially doubted her expertise. The same analytical abilities that had led to her discharge had just saved thousands of American lives and prevented a strategic catastrophe that would have altered the balance of power in the Pacific. "Admiral," Sarah said, "I didn't provide this analysis for the Navy's gratitude. I provided it because American sailors deserve leadership that prioritizes their safety over institutional comfort." Admiral Martinez nodded, recognizing that Sarah's ordeal represented broader problems within naval intelligence and command structures that preferred convenient assumptions over uncomfortable realities. Dr. Williams, Martinez said, "I'm recommending your immediate reinstatement to active duty with full restoration of rank and security clearance. The Navy needs officers who can provide accurate intelligence analysis regardless of political considerations." Sarah considered the offer, weighing her desire for vindication against her knowledge of the institutional forces that had destroyed her career for telling the truth. "Admiral, I appreciate a recommendation, but I think the Navy needs to demonstrate that it's capable of supporting officers who provide uncomfortable intelligence before asking those officers to return service." As the Reagan continued its modified deployment, implementing new procedures based on Sarah's intelligence analysis, the battle group operated with enhanced security and improved threat awareness. The submarine contacts that had been tracking the carrier were detected and countered using techniques that Sarah had developed, preventing potential attacks that could have cost thousands of American lives. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah's vindication represented recognition that accurate intelligence analysis required institutional courage to acknowledge uncomfortable realities, even when those realities challenged preferred narratives about American military superiority. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in the Pentagon's secure conference room, briefing senior naval officials on the intelligent analysis that had saved the Ronald Reagan battle group and exposed fundamental vulnerabilities in American carrier operations. The same officers who had supported her discharge were now praising her expertise and requesting her continued assistance in developing new threat assessment protocols. "Dr. Williams," said Admiral Patricia Hayes, the Chief of Naval Operations, "your analysis has forced us to fundamentally reconsider our assumptions about carrier vulnerability and submarine threats. We want to offer you a position as Senior Intelligence Advisor for Advanced Threat Analysis." Sarah looked around the conference room, noting the presence of officers who had remained silent during her discharge proceedings, but were now eager to associate themselves with her vindication. "Admiral Hayes, I appreciate the offer, but I have conditions." "Name them," Hayes replied. "First, complete restoration of my military record with acknowledgement that my discharge was improper and politically motivated. Second, implementation of intelligence analysis procedures that protect officers who report uncomfortable truths about military vulnerabilities. Third, public recognition that the threats I identified were real and that suppressing my analysis endangered American lives." Hayes was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of Sarah's demands. Accepting them would require the Navy to acknowledge institutional failures that extended far beyond a single intelligence officer's treatment. "Dr. Williams," Hayes said finally, "the Navy accepts your conditions. We're prepared to take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that intelligence officers can perform their duties without fear of retaliation for providing accurate analysis." Sarah nodded, recognizing that her vindication represented broader changes in how the Navy approached intelligence analysis and institutional accountability. "Admiral, I accept the position with the understanding that my primary responsibility is protecting American naval forces through accurate threat assessment, regardless of political considerations. 6 months later, Commander Sarah Williams, her rank fully restored, stood aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, observing anti-submarine warfare exercises that implemented detection and countermeasure techniques based on her intelligence analysis. The Navy's most advanced carrier was operating with enhanced security protocols that acknowledged advanced submarine threats and provided effective defensive measures. "Commander Williams," said Captain Robert Martinez, the Ford's commanding officer, "the new ASW protocols you develop have fundamentally improved our ability to detect and counter submarine threats. Every carrier in the fleet is now safer because of your work." Sarah watched as the Ford sonar operators successfully detected and tracked simulated submarine contacts using the analytical techniques she had developed during her time as a discharged intelligence officer. The same expertise that had led to her career destruction had ultimately become the foundation for enhanced naval security. "Captain," Sarah replied, "the protocols work because they're based on accurate intelligence analysis rather than institutional preferences. The Navy is safer when officers can report uncomfortable truths without fear of retaliation." The Ford continued its exercises, demonstrating capabilities that protected American naval forces against threats that had previously been dismissed as impossible or irrelevant. Sarah's intelligence analysis had not only saved the Ronald Reagan battle group, but had transformed how the entire Navy approached submarine warfare and carrier vulnerability. Today, the Naval Intelligence Advanced Threat Analysis Division, established based on Sarah's recommendations, continues to provide early warning about emerging military technologies and capabilities that challenge traditional American advantages. The division's motto, "Truth over Comfort," reflects the institutional changes that Sarah's vindication inspired. The USS Ronald Reagan continues to operate in contested waters, protected by intelligent analysis and defensive procedures that acknowledge the realities of modern naval warfare. The battle group that nearly fell victim to institutional ignorance now serves as a model for how American naval forces can adapt to evolving threats through accurate intelligence analysis. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah's story became a reminder that institutional integrity requires the courage to acknowledge uncomfortable realities, even when those realities challenge preferred narratives about military superiority. The Navy learned that protecting officers who tell difficult truths is essential to protecting the forces those officers serve. Commander Sarah Ghost Williams proved that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against foreign enemies, but against institutional forces that prefer comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. Her vindication demonstrated that accurate intelligence analysis requires both technical expertise and moral courage, the ability to identify threats and the willingness to report them regardless of political consequences. The quiet intelligence officer who was discharged for being too good at her job became the architect of enhanced naval security, proving that institutions grow stronger when they embrace rather than suppress the expertise of those who serve them with honor and integrity. Some heroes win battles with weapons and tactics. Others win them with knowledge, analysis, and the courage to speak truth to power. Sarah Williams won hers with all of these, transforming her personal vindication into enhanced security for every American sailor who depends on accurate intelligence to come home safely. The aircraft carrier that changed course to find her continued sailing with the knowledge that sometimes the most valuable assets are the people institutions try to discard, and that the most important victories come from recognizing expertise wherever it exists, regardless of rank, politics, or institutional convenience. In the end, Sarah's discharge became her qualification, her suppressed analysis became her vindication, and her institutional betrayal became the foundation for reforms that made the Navy stronger, smarter, and more capable of protecting American interests in an increasingly dangerous world. The truth always surfaces, even when institutions try to bury it beneath layers of politics and preference. And sometimes, when it finally does surface, it arrives aboard an aircraft carrier that broke protocol to find the one person who had been telling that truth all along.